Okay, everybody. I would like to introduce Sarah Williamson, our latest speaker this evening. And Sarah runs her equestrian business. You'll find her on Facebook, Encompass Equine Solutions. And Sarah takes a very much a holistic approach to the horse and the rider, and she has a wealth of knowledge in the saddle. She rode to a very high level, meter 30 show jumping, advanced eventing, I think open team chasing, medical, and some and high level dressage. But outside of the saddle, Sarah has studied foot trimming. She studied biomechanics with a lot of the top trainers. Is interested in saddle fit, horses posture, and has been doing equine body work studies in that as well. But equine welfare, I think I'd have to say, would probably be top of your priorities as far as the whole horse and rider thing goes. And really, it's just Sarah's way is just trying to improve the connection between the horse and rider, just so we have happier horses. And equine welfare would unfortunately be sort of fairly high in the ranks of equestrianism at the minute after this year. So I'm going to pass you on to Sarah, and I'm sure we're going to learn an awful lot about groundwork and connecting with your horse this evening.
Thank you very much. Hi everybody, I'm Sarah. I was just saying to Lisa, I never had horses growing up, so I used to ride whatever I was able to get my hands on, which were usually horses that other people didn't really want to ride. And then when I started having my own horses, I didn't have much money, so got rubbish horses that people didn't want. So I had to figure out their problems because I didn't have the option of getting another horse. I had what I had and I had to make the best of it. And to that end, I've tried to learn a lot about, natural horsemanship, classical dressage, bodywork, hoof mechanics, saddle fit, the way the horses are kept, the husbandry, the feeding and everything. And you just go round and round in circles and can get very confused. So I just pick what works for me in any situation with any one horse. I am no purist. I don't follow any one method. I use whatever I need to use in that moment with that horse, with that rider, because every horse is different and every rider is different and every environment is different. Every bale of hay is different. You can't be too purist because you get too much in a muddle. But when Lisa asked me if I'd have a chat on here with you guys, we thought the in-hand work I use a lot, but there's lots online about in-hand work. So we thought we'd just have a little play with something you can do in the winters when the weather's a bit cold and the horses are a bit cold or a bit stiff, when you just want to get everything moving before you get on board. So we thought we'd do this little presentation on how I use this a lot well, I use it all the time, but I use it particularly in the winter. It's just warming the horses up in hand. The horse in the picture, he hadn't got a saddle on because I wasn't actually going to ride him. Sometimes I'll not plan to ride them and I'll just jump on them bareback if they've worked nicely. So I'm not a purist. I sort of do what happens and what gets into my brain when I'm working with the horse. But anyway, so first, the benefits of warming your horses up in hand before you ride them in the winter months, particularly. So it allows you to assess the horse before you get on board, which can be really important. You see, are they stiff? Are they not stiff? Oh, this is going to beat me up. Anyway, prepares the horse's body to carry the rider's weight, which is something we need to think about a lot more. A dropped back is not a good back to sit on. So the in-hand work can help you get the horse's back ready for the rider's weight. It mobilizes the horse and the rider. By the time you've walked the horse around for 10 or 15 minutes and done some bits and pieces, you've mobilized and you've connected with the horse. And it also allows for nerves to calm. If something's a bit bright, a bit hot, been in a bit much, you can just walk with them. You can stop, you can breathe. Breathing is really important with horses. And you just take your time to connect with your horse and don't even think about getting on unless it feels right to get on. So there's a lot of reasons that you can use, benefits for warming the horse up a little bit in hand. If anyone wants to jump in at any time and ask any questions, then I'm happy, or pop it in the chat and Lisa can flag me. So when we'll start with a bit of an assessment of the horse. And to that end, how do you feel on walking into the working space? Are you ready to work? Are you calm? Are you tense? Have you had a shit day at work and your mind's a million miles an hour? Take the time when you enter the working space to figure out how you and your horse feels, because the rider has to feel okay too. Because if the rider doesn't feel okay, the chances are the horse won't be okay. So take the time to make sure you and the horse are both okay in that first few minutes. And then what I'll do is I'll do a series of walk, halt transitions. And this is just to make sure that the horse is staying with me. I'm not sure why this is skipping ahead, but we'll just ignore it. And I'll also ask them to step back a couple of steps, but it's not to back the horse up. It's just to say, are you with me? Can you move off me? Can you come forward? Can you stop? Can you start? Where are you? And then I'll do some big wide turns with the horse. And this would just be to assess how it's bending. Is it bending easier one way than the other? They all do. I've not yet met a horse that bends exactly the same on both reins, although some people seem to think that that's possible, but I haven't worked it out yet. And then I'll make some slightly smaller turns just to see if they're, crossing over nicely or if they're loading equally. And it's just a little bit of a game to see where everybody is, horse and rider. And we don't rush it. You want to feel the horse through the reins and the rope, and you want to match your energy with the horse's energy. And that again builds that mental connection, which builds the confidence and the calmness. We spend too long, or many people spend too long wrestling with their horses, trying to control their horses and dominate their horses. Or actually, if you just walk with the horse and concentrate on your footfalls and your breathing, quite often you can get a really good result without doing much more than that. The mental connection with horses, I think, is more important than the physical one. Because if you're not mentally in the right place, it doesn't matter how strong you are, how good a rider you are, you might get the horse to do what you want, but it won't be really connected to you. So, as I said, I'm no purist. There are numerous ways of working in hand. And if you follow any particular methodologies, you'll be told you have to do it their way. But when I first start the warm-up, the walk, halt, the backing up, the circling, I'll just lead them. And it's quite important that that you lead the horse beside you, that you're not in front of it, dragging it. Sometimes I'll walk backwards and watch it so I can watch the placement of the feet. Because I think, that gives you a lot of information about where the horse's body is. But then I want the horse to be walking with me. I don't want to be dragging it, because if you're dragging it, you're not connected with it. Most horses, I'll carry a schooling whip to work in hand. If your horse doesn't like the whip, don't carry it. There are no hard and fast rules when working with horses, because every horse and every rider is different. So then you've got this is a little bit more towards the Philippe Carl line of thought, which is the outside rein over halfway up the neck. And that gives you a lot of access to the pole flexion, but it doesn't really give you any access to the shoulder. This is the légèreté. This is the where they're lifting the bit and getting the horse to soften to the bit, and flexions and things. It can be really handy if you've got a horse that's a bit stuck in the pole, because you can be quite gentle and just mobilize the pole a little bit, but it's not going to control very much of the horse. So again, this is something that I'll often use in the early stages, or if I'm doing something else and I feel the pole's locked up, I'll come back to this. This is a joy about having the freedom to do what feels right with that horse rather than following a methodology. So in this one, I've got the outside rein a lot further back. You can almost have it further back and over the saddle if you wish, depends on the horse. But with the outside rein further back, you've got control of the shoulder, or the outside shoulder more, excuse me. So, and sometimes I'll almost ride the horse, Nev's a little horse, he's a little X-race horse that we use for the demo, but I'll almost put my outside hand to the outside and my inside hand to the inside as if I was riding. And I didn't get a slide of that because I only thought about that one today. But this way, if you're trying to do some lateral work, you have control of the outside shoulder. And then you have the direct contact, which is holding underneath the reins, so you can get left flexion, right flexion. You can use this if the horse is like turning into you or just being a bit rude or charging over the top of you, because it gives you access to both reins. What we're not doing with the reins is we're not using the reins to control the horse. We're using them to converse with the horse. So you don't want to be using the reins. Sometimes if they don't understand the in-hand work, you might have to say, "Oi, come back here," the same as you would with the riding. But you don't want to be using the reins to fix the horse in any way. You just use the reins to show the horse where you want it to go. Because horses rarely put their heads in the right place without being given the options, shown the way. So you use the reins to help show the horse the way, and then you leave the horse to it. When they're more used to it and they've done more of it, you barely need to touch the reins. But the direct contact can be really helpful with horses with mouth problems or with when you're first learning, because it gives us a feeling of a little bit more control. And then this is the what I find is the where you want to be, which is what we learned from Jean-Luc Cornil in The Science of Motion, which is you've got the reins in one hand in front of the saddle, almost in the position of the rider sitting on the horse's back. And it's very subtle communication in this manner. But if you start in this manner and the horse doesn't understand it and the horse is falling forward, it's quite easy to pull. You can actually get quite a lot of leverage. You can get your elbow into the back of the saddle, into the flap of the saddle, and that's not what we're wanting. We're not wanting that in the in-hand work any more than on the riding. And on the ground, we are generally more powerful over the horse, especially if you're in a bridle, because we've got the leverage of the ground. So it's very easy to get quite strong with horses on the ground. But that's where you're looking for the calmness and the connection and the assessment, the mental calmness of horse and rider. If you find that you're trying to do something, the horse is getting really ratty, just take the reins over his head and walk, or even just stand next to him with your hand on one rein and just take all the pressure off and just walk until the horse settles down or until the handler settles down, because there's no point fighting them. What I'm learning more and more with horses is they actually really, really want to work with us in the majority of cases, but we often don't give them chances and times to figure it out. We sort of go, "I want you to do this." And the horse goes, "Well, I don't understand." So they pull or they run away or they get silly, and we go, "Oi, come back here." And actually, when they don't understand, just back off. We expect horses to learn things in 1 or 2 sessions. And in my experience, if you equate the learning capacity of a horse with around a 12-year-old child, we don't expect a 12-year-old child to learn a new skill in a couple of days or a couple of weeks. It takes time and repetition. And if you get cross and start shouting at that child or trying to force it, the child generally, they might comply, but they'll generally switch off. So it's much better if you're getting in a muddle, just take the pressure off, go for a walk, breathe, stand, relax, ground yourself, do whatever you need to do. Put your headphones on and put some music on, but anything just to take you back down so you get out of that confrontational feeling, which we all get into with horses, whether we want to admit it or not. Sometimes it's through safety. We actually have to say, oi, come here, because we don't want to get stood on. But it's really important to just be aware of their learning capacity is similar to that of a 12-year-old child. So it takes time for the penny to drop. And also learning involves building neural pathways, which actually means building new connections within the brain. And this is why the horses often don't get it. And then suddenly one day it's like they've been doing it all their lives, because those neural pathways have built. So it's really important to understand the brain as much as anything else, because when you're doing something different, and the more the habit that you're trying to break is ingrained in the horse, the more it'll try and use the neural pathways it's got, which then means it's harder to get it to build the new one. But so it's all these things that we really have to take into consideration. That's why I say I'm no purist, because if we don't know bits of everything, we're just going to get stuck. So hopefully this will play and I'll shut up, and it should just...
I'll start the session just by giving the horse a walk around the school a couple of times on both reins. And then I'll ask him to stand. Might just ask him to shift back just a step or two. It's just to check where he is, where his balance is. And then we'll move forward. And then I might ask him just to step back. Good. Don't force, it's just an ask. The initial warm-up is literally just that, is to see where the horse is. And then I'll do some little turns, see where he is, see where he's tracking, feel which way he's stiffer. Try not to let him eat the reins. I use a bridle because I ride him in a bridle, but you can use a cavesson, a halter, a bitless, whatever. It's really just the initial check where the horse is. Is he on side? Is he with you? And just to be with him to start with, before you start asking anything more complicated.
So just got to run through videos now. So anyone wants to jump in at any point? As just said in that video, I don't mind what you have on the horse's head. I don't mind if you have nothing on the horse's head. You know, even if you're at Liberty work, and you can do this at Liberty, if your horse is trained at Liberty, positive reinforcement. What matters to me is the connection between the horse and the rider, and the physicality of building the horse's body up for you to then sit on it, rather than just sitting on them cold out of the stable. So
next thing we want to assess is his balance and his posture. Neville is a typical ex-race horse. He's had kissing spine surgery, so we're always a little bit battling with the top line. You can see his natural posture. He's quite low between the front legs, a lot of brace in the brachiocephalic, very weak in the top of the neck. Although actually when you sit on him, he's got quite a width of neck. You know, he's got a lot of neck widthways, but just not the top line. So he's not quite as weak as he looks. So the area I want to concentrate on is sort of picking the front up. So this is just going, before we start, we just want a softening, trying to find something that's a little bit more neutral. And then can he move off without bracing? And then we'll come back to stand. And then we'll just see, can he just not necessarily shift back, but just move the weight a little bit, move the centre of balance a little bit further back. Again, we're looking at this C7, T1 junction, which we want the horse to carry that higher. He can't carry that higher if his neck's there, because you're pushing it down. He can't carry it higher if we insist on flexing his pole, because again, we're pushing it down. So we need the neck long and out, and we want this brachiocephalic to be soft. Ideally, we don't want him chewing the reins. So when I'm asking him here, I'm just asking him to push back into this area. And then I want him to just soften his neck and walk forward. Good. And then stop. And they need to be able to stop easily. If they're pulling forward and they can't stop, then the balance is all too far forward.
So again, on that, we're looking at this junction, and the next slides will show it a bit more, but this C7T1 junction, which is what gives the lift of the front of the horse. And I don't know, I know because sometimes the video playback's a bit jittery, but I don't know if people could see just by rocking his body weight back, how his posture changed. And we've got another one
The thing we
first.
want to assess is
Oh, that's the same one, sorry. So this is the area that we've got to focus on, and this is the lifting of the thoracic sling and lifting of the forehand. And so you've got C7 and T1 here. When the horse is low between the shoulder blades, this whole junction drops down. The rib cage is low, the sternum hangs low down beneath. But as this bit drops down, this bit can actually push up, so you can get a lot of tension in the lumbar because the whole front of the rib cage is dropped down. And because the ribs are attached to the spine, they pull, it's like a big barrel. So as the front goes down, the back comes up. And I think in a lot of modern teaching, we've actually, particularly with the long and low, when the neck goes down the wrong way, the neck can go low without dropping here. But most of the time, what happens when people take a horse long and low is they drop low here. But then that swings the rib cage up here and it pushes the back up. And I think a lot of people have mistaken the feeling of this up as the back being up under the saddle, whereas the actual area we want up is the withers. So when you feel the horse's back up, you want to feel the bit under your thigh and in front of you come up, not the bit behind your seat. Because if you feel the back of the back come up, more the lumbar than the thoracic, then chances are your horse is down between its front legs and it's just a rotation of the rib cage. There's also this problem that Sharon May Davis has found, which is the nuchal ligament. The top one, A, is where the nuchal ligament should be and where it used to be. Stop it. But in many modern horses, they're finding that this lower part of the nuchal ligament has gone, is vanished. And that seems to be since the First and Second World War, when so many horses were killed and we were left with a much smaller gene pool, particularly in the European sort of warm bloods, and also women started riding horses. Because a horse with a full laminin ligament connection, you can't bully it by bending its neck. Its neck won't bend. That's why donkeys are so hard to ride and why you can't bully a donkey, because they generally have a full lamellar connection. So if you've lost this little bit here, you can really easily dominate the horse through flexing its neck. And that has become a very common method of training horses. So we've actually bred ourselves into a problem. We've bred ourselves into a situation that, and in fact, some horses are getting less and less. And another fascinating fact from anyone who's ever spoken to Sharon May Davis is this similar thing has been found in prehistoric creatures in the 1,000 years up to extinction. So it's something we actually need to be a little bit aware of, because if this keep dropping off and keep getting thinner and weaker, we're going to have a horse that can't actually hold its head up. So it's actually potentially an extinction event, which when she was talking about that, when I went to a dissection at the beginning of November, it was a bit like, oh, heck. I think they found it in woolly mammoths and woolly rhinos that they had actually started to lose that lower lamella portion, which is from a shrunk gene pool. So So if you've got any weird and wonderful bloodlines out there, use them. Don't use the fashionable ones, use the weird and wonderful ones. And this is just through the balance through movement method, the Celeste Lazarus stuff. So when you look at diagrams of horses, this T2, T1, C7 always look out in front of the shoulder. But when you speak to body workers, this is what they're finding. They're finding that the whole back of the horse is sunk in, the spine is sunk down and in. And you can see from the sort of the shadow line, the difference in the neck. And how often do we see this sort of neck on horses? So when I talk about wanting to lift the front of the horse, you know, a little bit of a lift here can push the withers sort of up, and then the neck, if you as a handler ask the neck out forward, you can get this back out where it needs to be. And then you completely change the way the horse can use its body, because when the neck is sunk back and down and in, it can't build that bottom third. It just can't happen. And if you use leverage on the head to flex the pole, this or same thing will happen. This is the problem with things like jaw reins, bunges, pessoas. Anything that physically causes a horse to flex its neck will almost certainly get him to drop in C7T1. Whereas if you can lift, think of lifting the chest of the horse, like the breastbone, sort of this area here, and then extending the neck away. And you want to be thinking of almost putting traction in this lower third of the neck, the top line. So you want that, because these are all connected. There's muscles connected to the spinal processes. I'm not a physiotherapist. I'm not very good with all the different names. But if you can imagine that this neck is sunk and dropped down, so these muscles are sort of pulling the back almost more down. Whereas if you can ask the horse to lift through its neck, lift through its front, then you can build that top line, and then you'll get the extension of the pole, and then the head will just go in the right place. It was a tragedy to horses that their necks, when they carry themselves well, form the shape that we're all addicted to, that lovely big neck, because humans very quickly figured they could manufacture that by just pulling. Whereas if you actually ride the horse's front end up and allow the neck to go forward, just the weight of the head will put the horse on the bit. It's physics, it's mechanics. Most things with moving parts are governed by the laws of physics, but we just don't always understand them well enough. So we've got a few more videos now.
Depending on the individual horse, I might give them a little trot in hand, I might not. If I'm giving them a trot early on, I will just do it with the horse quite loose, just to again see where his body is. Also, if it's freezing cold, it's a good way to warm us up. You do need to be a little bit careful if you're trotting them loose or this close to them, because sometimes they can be a bit exuberant and you don't want to get kicked. So just know your horse.
So disclaimer on that, I said it, just know your horse, because, you know, if they haven't been out for a while, they can be a bit yee-haw. I don't tend to lunge a yeehaw one and get it out of its system too much, because I think that actually often just gets them higher. So I'll just do walk, trot, circles, turning, loops, and just give their brain something else to think about rather than try and stop them being yeehaw.
Once they're warmed up a little bit more, you can ask for a little bit more collection in the trot. Once they're warmed up a little bit more.
Just another disclaimer, I should have said connection, not collection. We don't want to talk about collection because that makes people pull.
You can ask for a little bit more collection in the trot. And what I quite like about a horse like him, to be able to work him in hand to warm him up, because when he goes a little bit peacocky and you're on him, it can be quite difficult to help him just find a better posture. Again, in hand. I'm not putting his head in, I'm just trying to suggest to him that it would be more comfortable if he dropped his top line and used his body a little bit better. So he gets quite defensive. And it's just not a case of placing his head, it's just guiding him. And your posture is important. You must be having the same sort of posture and balance with your own body that you want your horse to have. Not fair for them to do all the work. We have to do a bit of the work too.
So again, you know, there's no point doing in-hand work with your shoulders slouched or taking short, quick steps. Or a lot of people, when they talk about in-hand, they talk about matching the steps with the horse. That happens. Don't try and make it happen. When you're in balance with the horse, when you and the horse sort of are meeting at that level, almost a subconscious level, you'll suddenly realize that you are matching strides with the horse. You sometimes see it in the carriage horses that you'll have four in hand and they're all absolutely in sync. And it may only be for a few strides, but I've seen people doing in hand work getting obsessed with, I'm meant to be matching strides with the horse. And that you're not concentrating on the horse, you're concentrating on one part of it, you're just concentrating on matching strides. So don't worry about matching strides with the horse, just work on being and the same mental energy, physical energy level as the horse, and that sort of thing will come. And as you saw in that video, I can run any through these again if people want to, but I was riding him, so I had one hand on each side of him, just because he's had kissing spine surgery. He's got a typical low thoroughbred neck. So by being able to use the reins individually, I can just say to him, look, if you drop your poll, you drop your neck, you take the weight out of your brachiocephalic muscle, it's a little bit easier to move. So it's just a conversation that you can have with them under saddle and on the ground. You need, in my opinion, unless you're purely doing in-hand work, which I sometimes do for periods when horses have problems, but if you're doing in-hand work to ride the horse, you want the same communication. So, you know, there's nothing wrong with if you've got a small enough horse or you're tall enough to have a hand on either side of the horse, even though, again, some purists would probably string me up for saying such a thing.
Anyone who knows me knows I'm quite cautious about using poles. I think you can do a lot of damage to horses using too many poles. Sometimes for the sake of creating a bit more interest, I will scatter the odd pole out and just step the horse over a pole and see what their balance is. If they fall forward, ask him to stop, walk him on again. Come back and have another go. And the same thing with some little obstacles. Again, never actually asked him to do this, so we'll see how he goes. Good lad. This is as much to build your connection with the horse and to build the control and to build the rapport. And then just to see where the horse is, how he does things, and whether he's the same today, whether he is a different day, whether he's stiffer one way than the other. All these just little things that you can notice when you have a few obstacles around, just to move them around. You don't have to, but it can just help. Another thing you can do, if the horse is capable and the handler is capable, I haven't done much of this with Neville, so I don't know how it's going to work, but you can just ask for a little bit of lateral work, a little bit of shoulder in. Depending on how patient and skilled you are and the horse, you can build that into sort of some leg yields, some half passes, small pirouette, quarter turns. Not bad. But what I love about the in-hand warm-up is it gets the horse mentally into work mode without having to deal with the weight of the rider. Not really shouldering, is it, Nev? It's a good effort. And again, things don't have to be perfect. We're not looking for perfection. We're just looking to mobilise the horse, to get its brain in the game, and to just start thinking about getting the lift between the front legs, the lift of this area where the cervical spine joins the thoracic spine. And that's the area that the horse can so easily drop between its front legs. So being aware of that area on the in-hand work can just get the horse's body posture and balance in a better place before the rider even gets on. And that's what Neville thinks of that. Good boy. Good demo, pony. Another thing.
So that's basically how I work with, well, warming them up in hand or working them in hand. Yeah, so if anybody has anything they wish to ask, then if Lisa's happy, then fire away. Or if anyone wants to watch any of the slides back again, we can probably find them again.
I have a couple of questions. So when you're asking for obviously the change in posture back the way, are you just pushing on the pecs, or are you slightly more under, sort of on more on?
It's sort of almost like cupping the sternum.
Yeah, and then going slightly up.
And you want to be thinking that you're almost asking the sternum to move back towards the back of the withers.
Okay.
So it's like a diagonal, it's a feeling. So the because you almost want to draw the sternum forwards and up as you push as you take the energy towards the withers. So if they haven't got a saddle on, you want to see the back just behind the withers just fill fractionally. Okay. So, and if you ask them too much, they'll often tighten behind the withers and try and step back. So it's more just a rock than a push. And if you've got a horse that's really down between the front legs and is really struggling, if you think of rocking them back, and you can actually put a hand on the wither if they haven't got a saddle on, or even if they have, and almost guide a rock from the sternum up, wither back, with a forward sternum down. And this is coming a little bit into the Alexander and the Feldenkrais type work, which is you're almost thinking of moving the energy controlling the skeleton. But if the horse naturally falls forward, then you let him come forward, but you use, because of the there's a natural rebound. Every action has the equal and opposite reaction. So if you almost encourage them to come more forward and down, then it gives you more up and back afterwards. So you take the horse where it wants to go comfortably, but then you say, now can you go away from that? Now can you come back to where you want to be? Now can you go away from that? And then can you hold as you go away from it? But by doing it by having in your mind the thought that you're allowing him to collapse forward because that's where the horse can do it. But then you're taking it back and say, how about this? But that's okay to be there. How about this? Can you hold this? It's just a kind of way of doing it. And it can be really useful for fascial release, very gentle fascial release and restrictions. That sort of rocking. Most living things enjoy being gently rocked as long as you're not forcing them into any particular posture. And don't try and push them more up and back towards the wither than they can go, because then they'll just brace. So it's just a very gentle rocking, and you just rock the weight back and bring it forward. It's handy if you've got a horse that really struggles with that. It's handy to do it without the saddle on, so you can see whether you just see the muscle behind the wither fill in or whether it shrinks down. If it shrinks down, then the horse is rocking back in extension, so you need to do it less. Or play with the position of the horse's head, because sometimes if they're struggling, by lowering their head, they can rock back into the wither a little bit more. If they go too low, they probably won't be able to do it at all. So you've got to just look at your horse, and you've got to play with the position of the head. You've got to play with the balance. And I use the word play all the time because that's what we need to do, because we learn far quicker through play than we do through instruction, because play has an element of inhibition about it. So we're not sticking to rigid rules, and it opens our minds more. So yes, you've got to have an idea of what you're doing, but play with it. Don't try and create what you think you should be getting. Just mess around in the grey area between good, bad, and indifferent, because that's usually where the magic happens, in that grey area in between.
The other question I have is, I think initially in the first video or the second video, did you, to try and get the horse's head maybe to come lower, did you slightly move him, sort of flex him left and right a bit? And is that what you're saying when you're guiding with the rein as well?
Yeah, with him, because he's typical thoroughbred, he's very, very locked in his neck. Yeah, I'll just gently mobilize, but it's a couple of centimeters either way. It's not these huge flexions that you see the dressage people, well, the show jumpers often mainly, and the dealers. It's a wiggle. Again, going back to different things I've learned. The Masterson method is a great one because it's all about these little wiggles. And Celeste's work, the balance through movement method. Again, it's all about very soft, gentle movements, because you need to stay below the brace point. Because if you try and move too much, and the horse goes, oh God, I don't like that, and they brace, the movement's useless. You might be able to force them through it, but you've forced them through it. So they've done it in a defensive way, rather than in a way that they can learn to give themselves. So you keep it very gentle, but think of it as little gentle moves, little wiggles, little rocks, and you can't go far wrong. Sometimes if a horse doesn't want to lower its head, you can just put your hand on the pole. Don't try and force it down, but just the weight of your hand. And sometimes if they're really stuck, I'll have a pocket full of treats, and I'll lure the horse down. And sometimes that can be really handy, because you can lure the horse's nose down, and then you can take the head back a little bit to see if that makes him rock back up into his withers. So, use what your brain thinks that horse needs to help it utilize its body in a better way. Because we're all wanting the same things. We're all wanting the horses up and to carry us, because when that front is up, when the C7T1 junction comes up, it brings the rib cage up level, and then that allows the pelvis to flex. If C7T1 is down, then the rib cage gets pushed high at the back, which forces the pelvis away. So it's very, very hard. I mean, when people say about, oh, you've got to get the hind legs under, yes, you have. But if the horse's rib cage is at that angle, that horse cannot flex its pelvis enough to get the hind legs up. So you've got to get the front up before you can get the rib cage up, before you can get the hind legs under. So, Celeste is right in her focusing in the thoracic sling area, and all these other people who are focusing on the thoracic sling. People think of it in different ways, but I tend to think of the position of the skeleton of the horse I'm working with, and is that skeleton where I want it to be? And if it's not, what can I do to help place the skeleton? Bearing in mind the skeleton's all wrapped up with soft tissue, with tendons and ligaments and muscles, all that crisscross, all that intertwine, all that move in multiple different directions. You know, you can't isolate one muscle and say, oh, well, I want this muscle to do that, because while this muscle does that, there's other muscles pulled down, pulled left, pulled right, pulled sideways, got fatter, got thinner. Nothing works in isolation. And again, you can get a little bit stuck on learning all the muscles and the bones and all the educational side of it, but actually just having in your mind, and again, going to other people, I've worked with Gillian Higgins with the Horses Inside Out, seeing where the skeleton sits under the skin can be a really helpful visual. It's not exactly like that, because when muscles do things under the skin, the bones don't stay in the same places, but it's a good visual. So if you're riding a horse, you think its skeleton is down there, you think, right, well, what can I do to help that horse come up? Well, you might want to get off it and say, can you lift? And do that for 5 minutes and then get back on it and see whether it can lift. But having an idea, too many riders, I doubt that's anything to do with this group, because I think these are all fairly educated equestrians, but a lot of day-to-day riders have no clue of the mechanics of the machine they're sitting on. And it's a machine with feelings, and it's a machine that can like any machine, if the working parts are out of whack, then it's going to wear out quicker and things are going to break. But the other thing to never forget with horses is the balance we need, the lifted front, the flex quarters, the carrying. They only need it to be ridden. They don't need it to be horses. And again, this is why it's so important to understand things to help them become a riding horse, because they don't need to do what we want them to do to be horses. They only need to do it to be riding horses. And this is where I come back all the time. It's education, 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 which is why these sort of group chats are just so beneficial to everybody, because they just bring in a different point of view that can go, oh, okay, I'll look at it that way. I mean, I was watching one, an in-hand one, Lucy, somebody or other, and she's trains with the academic art of riding. And she was saying when she's doing the lateral work in hand, just to tickle the horse where your leg would be when you're flexing it. So you're teaching the in-hand horse just a little bit of a tickle, a little bit of a touch where your leg would be means bend. Before you even get on it, you're teaching it the cue. So, you know, and I'd never really thought of it that way. And again, that was just this week. You think, oh, okay, well, we'll take that out and we'll play with that as well. So it's really important to be open-minded and just look at what everybody else is doing. And as I say, concentrate on the 85% of things that most of us agree is right, and stop fighting about the 15% that we disagree on. Because if you can get 85% of it right, you're actually doing pretty good. We don't need to worry about the 15% where we differ. So I will shut up now, unless anyone else wishes to ask anything else. I will stop sharing.
There's been two, Vicky had mentioned the fact that her horse has just been clipped and she now notices a difference in her horse's pecs.
What, left and right?
Yes. So I think it was the left. I can't see the chat. Can I find the chats on this? Chat there. There. Left pec is larger and she struggles on the left rein with balance and canter and rushes. What exercises could help?
So left is larger. Left rein. So the horse is probably bracing with its left leg. That is its dominant leg. So what you want to do is, and this is a little bit of going to Thomas Ritter, which is you want to think about putting the weight to the outside. As you're riding, when you're riding on the left rein, think of carrying the horse's weight more towards the outside pair of limbs. And how do you do that? And again, this is the crux of it, because everybody does it differently, because everyone's a slightly different shape and every horse feels every rider differently. But it's a little bit of an idea of shoulder in on the left rein, but focusing with almost taking the withers slightly to the right, but not letting the neck bend, just keeping the weight over to the outside shoulder. So, because shoulder in should be to strengthen the inside hind leg. So to get shoulder in, if we just do it with the reins, we sort of miss the point. When I think of shoulder in, I think of where's the horse's pelvis behind me, and I want to draw the inside hind leg down and forwards towards me, towards my inside seat bone. And I want that inside leg to plant. And the energy with horses, because the hind legs sit out to the side and then come into the spine via the pelvis, the drive from behind is always oblique. So left hind to right front, right hind to left front. So most horses are right hind weak, so they throw the weight to the left front leg. So if you can think, I want to think of my horse's pelvis. In the case of Vicky's horse, you maybe want to think, I want to bring the horse's inside hip down and forwards underneath me. And then I want to carry the energy from my inside leg towards the horse's outside shoulder. And this is your inside leg to your outside rein. And the energy is already going that way because the push from the left hind leg is going towards the right shoulder, because the hind legs are stuck at the side. Then they come into the spine through the pelvis, which is a big triangular shape. So you've got the driving force either side, but they're not pistons. They have to come into the spine. So by the outside drive being brought into the spine, pushes to the opposite shoulder. Does that make sense? So with that horse, I'd be thinking of any movement that is engaging the left hind and putting the balance towards the right front. Because the chances are the horse is slightly weak right hind. Most horses are. A lot of that has to do with the guts, because the cecum is a massive organ that sits just in front of the right hind leg. So if the horse has any sort of gut issues, they can be reluctant to bring the right hind leg forward. But equally, they might not have any issues at all. All horses are slightly left or right-handed the same way we are. And most horses I see are right hind leg weak, which means they then build more muscle on the left front because that's compensating. Does that make sense to Vicky? Hopefully. And Rachel's saying about the poles, interesting, as many professionals, vets and physios use pole works. Yes, they do. Now, the problem with poles is they make horses pick their legs up higher than they generally would. They're perfectly capable of picking their legs up higher, but their joints are set to work in a smaller field of motion than the full range of motion. If you work in the full range of motion all the time, you wear it out. The cartilage gets thinner towards the outer reaches of the joints because they're not meant to go into that very often. It's a little bit like your sand traps, your gravel traps for your lorries at the bottom of steep hills when the brakes are burnt out. You know, they are there and they can rotate into those joint spaces, but you only want to do it when they need to. So I would use poles if a horse has had an injury that's made a joint very stiff. I might use poles, but I will probably just use one pole, step over it, move around, step over it, move around. The other thing, and Anita Miles and I did some videos on this at our last clinic together here, where we videoed the horses walking and trotting over just 3 poles. And the horses there was a coloured horse, there was a big warm blood, really nice dressage horse, there was a couple of ponies, and every single one of them extended the pelvis, the spine, and flexed the pelvis the wrong way over the poles. The physios are going to say, oh yes, he's going to bring his hind leg and he's going to flex his pelvis and he's going to lift up. Yes, in a perfect world he will, but most horses go, oh, poles, and they throw their weight onto the front leg and they hollow their back and they extend the pelvis out behind them, which is, and then they flex the stifles a lot more. A lot of poles, if especially trotting over raised poles, if you watch the horse's stifles, they're coming way up and out to the side because the pelvis is an extension. So that's all they can do. They're winging their stifles out to lift them up. So poles will build muscle. They will build masses of muscle, as will water treadmills, as will Pessoas. Whether that muscle's any good to you or not, and at what cost you're building that muscle, is where I sort of have a big problem with all of these things. Horses use ground force reaction to move. They put their foot on the ground, they load the weight down, and then the elastic recoil helps push the limbs up. You get on a treadmill where the ground's being pulled away from the horses, they can't use that elastic recoil. So therefore, they're having to use muscle mass to pull the horses up and to move, which will build muscle, whether it's any use or not, and at what expense to the rest of the body, because to lift the front, what we want, the thoracic sling, they have to bounce the front legs. The front leg has to come off the ground like a pogo stick to create upward force. When the ground's pulled away from them, they're always dropping forward. You're always going to be low in that C7, T1, T2 junction. The thoracic sling is never going to build on a treadmill. Muscle will build, thoracic sling won't. So a lot of rehab goes purely on the external visual. A lot of training is on how does it look from the outside? Has he got good muscles? They don't look at how the horse underneath the muscles is working. And a lot of very heavily muscled horses are actually working in a really poor manner. So it's, yeah, it's a bit of a can of worms. But anyway, anybody else got anything to say? I managed to find the chat. Sorry?
Is there anybody else? Doesn't seem. No.
No.
No. Well, oh, very interesting. Yeah, no, I know it's I can sit and listen to you all night, but I think we better.
I think we've been very controlled tonight, actually.
Everybody with their videos off and their audio off.
Yeah.
Do
walkers have the same effect as poles? Walkers don't necessarily have the same effect as poles because they're just walking. They're just walking. So a horse isn't going to carry itself well in a walker. But you know what? If they just need some exercise, I would never put kit on a horse. You see people having side reins on the horses in the walkers and all of that. And it's the same a little bit with using kit lunging. Unless you're up close and personal to be able to rebalance the horse when it goes wrong, the chances are the horse is going to have poor posture because they don't need good posture except when we ride them. And that's our choice, not theirs. So walkers, I use a walker when they're in a lot because it gives them a leg stretch. But I would never use a walker for anything other than a leg stretch. And I do lunge horses, but I'm very aware of how they're using themselves when they're being lunged. I don't use any kit on them. And if the posture goes, then I'll come back, I'll go up close. I'll work them on a cavesson, on the reins, whatever I've got, but I'll work on getting that balance back and then I'll send them out again. I don't like letting horses run off steam on the lunge because if you take pictures of the angles they're at and the angles the limbs are at and then the torsion of the joints and the feet hitting the ground sideways and twisting, it's just not pretty. So I'm very wary about to any speed lunging. You'll rarely see me lunging a horse any more than a very slow, dribbly, pathetic looking trot. because I'm looking for balance. And the slower they can go, as long as they're not trotting like they're stuck in quicksand, but the slower they go, the more time they have between each stride to organise their bodies. Same with the in-hand work, by keeping it slow and steady. You've got time to organise your body, they've got time to organise their body between each step. The faster you go, the more you know that with human fitness, a lot of people are very good at doing like certain exercises slowly, but you speed it up and the coordination goes out the window. So again, it's just keep it slow and gradually build up, and gradually is months and years. You know, horses' skeletons aren't fully formed till they're 8. They're not fully formed till they're 8. And the lameness, the failure rate of, I'm not sure if it was Holland or Denmark, but there was one of the big breeding countries did a study, and the average fail rate of these highly bred warm bloods was 8. So as their skeletons can finish forming, they're knackered. And Sharon May Davis again finds that with the ECVM problems, that the horses tend to cope really well until the skeleton finally forms properly, and that removes all their little outs, or it fixes the body, and then they can't find the ways to manage the difficulty things like ECVM cause. So yes, it's all fascinating, and you can get the point you think, should we even be riding them? But if we didn't ride them, what purpose would they have? They wouldn't. They'd just cease to exist to a degree. It'd be a few kept here and there, like rare breeds of other farm animals and things, that they would just cease to exist, and that would be quite sad. But I think we can ride them, but we've got to understand how they need to be to carry us better than we currently do, to do it safely. So I still ride mine.
I know it's just I have that quandary at times as well, you know, and even more so now, I think with age, you just consider, you know, should I really be doing this? But I think so long as everybody obviously in this group is sort of very horse centered, and we're doing the best we can to keep them as comfortable, you know, to be ridden. So sort of
and also it does them good. You know, you look at people who don't have a job and don't have a purpose, and they're the people who live their lives on benefits and end up on the drugs and the drink and the miserable existence. And I think horses are the same. I think horses I have retired horses, but they still do stuff. They don't just, it breaks my heart when someone says, oh, I'll retire him. And I know for the rest of that horse's life, it's going to go from a stable to a postage stamp field on its own, to the stable, to the postage stamp field, to the stable for the next 15 years. And even if you can't ride them anymore, even if they're not sound, they can still do loads of stuff in hand and enjoy it, or at liberty. You know, go and, I don't know if you come across Connie Colfox. She's absolutely brilliant. She's mad as a hatter, but she gets all these mad bolting event horses and gets them riding bitless, bridle, completely tactless. And she does it with positive reinforcement. And you know, she's had some, you know, 5-star horses. She's had an Olympic horse that had all sorts of problems, that lost its bottle and couldn't come out the show jumping arena. And she's riding it with no tack, loose. So there's always other ways to do these things. And I hurt sometimes. I know people who are really lame and really broken, but we're actually better if we keep moving. You just do it within your capabilities. And you don't expect, you know, your 23-year-old who's got navicular and is a bit crunky to go out and do piaffe passage and flying changes. But he might quite like doing a little bit of gentle shouldering or bending around some poles, or just going for a walk in the countryside. You know, we take them for walks in the countryside and just be with them. You know, it's I think we all want to ride, that's why we do it. But as you understand the non-ridden options better, it just gives you more to, again, play with. So
no, lovely. Thank you so much for giving us a wee bit of an insight into your trains of thought. I'm sure we get we can get another one organised later. Funny, I've got about 4 or 5 people for January, February, March time, but we could push another one out maybe later on next year if you're.
Yeah, well, let me know. Throw me a topic and I'll find a horse and try and do a video of it.
Okay, perfect. So Merry
I've
Christmas.
got all sorts of horses. I can usually find something to do something with.
Well, this is much better than trying to do Christmas shopping anyway.
Oh, I've done all of that.
Oh dear.
Nice. Anyway, thank you so much for inviting me. I've really enjoyed it.
No,
I hope
thank you.
everyone's got a little bit out of that.
No, absolutely. We definitely have. Thank you. And thank you everybody for attending.
Yes, thank you, everybody.
The webinar, we'll have that up on the group. The recording will be up tomorrow for people who haven't seen it. So thank you, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Yes, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everybody. And looking forward to summer. Nearly the shortest day. We're nearly past the shortest day.
We're nearly there. All the best. Bye.
Okay, cheers. Bye.
Bye.